If I walk into a bank, go up to the teller and say, "Give me $100, the teller's probably going to think I'm a robber. What I need to do is say which account I want to access, and then usually I'm required to provide some proof of identification, maybe a driver's license that can match the account. But what did banks do before everyone was carrying around identification? Well, one thing to keep in mind is that banks were a lot smaller and communities were smaller too. So you probably knew the teller from church or school. Another thing banks could do, and they still do, is they can have a signature card. When you create the account, you sign this signature card, and then whenever you want to make a transaction, they can compare the signature you have with the one on file. And this is especially relevant when a lot of people want to access the same account. You can have all of their signatures on file. Now, a really interesting thing is that this task is something that servers have to do anytime you make a request to access your email. The server has to think, is this person who they say they are, and are they authorized to access your email or bank account or whatever it is? Unlike our small bank where everyone knows each other, computers are accessible to the entire world. And so you can have people making requests from all over, which makes identification and security quite a challenge. Now, if you were to draw from the banking analogy we were talking about, like a signature card, what you could do is when you create an account, the system could put a security key on your computer. That'd be kind of like a cookie if you've heard of those. Whenever you try to access your account, your computer could give that as proof of identification. That would really work, except when you try to access your account from another computer. Then it'll be like, I don't know you. And so how do we solve that problem when we want to expand our access to use different devices for the same account? We can actually look towards history for another example. If you wanted to open up an account and you weren't very well known, what you could do is bring with you a letter from someone that is known to the bank that says, I know Scott, he's a trusted individual, and you'd use that as your credentials to open up the account. How do you expand access so that other computers and devices can access this account on your behalf? Now, the simplest technique is to just use a PIN or password. If you know the PIN or password, you should be able to get access. And this is what used to be the case. PINs and passwords were all you needed to access a lot of computer resources. And there's a few issues with PINs and passwords. One of the biggest issues with PINs and passwords is that people reuse them. They'll use the same PIN on their locker combination as they use for their bank account. And they don't protect their locker as much as they would their bank account. They'll say, hey, John, yeah, you can get something out of my locker. The combo is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then John might be like, I wonder if this is the same number he uses on other things. And he tries it on your bank account and it works. Now he has access. And this has actually happened a lot of times. One of the hacks that I can think of was LinkedIn got hacked and all of their passwords were exposed. And someone went through all those passwords and email addresses and they compared them for other places. And they were able to use that because someone at Dropbox used the same password and email address to access their Dropbox resources. And so that engineer at Dropbox allowed the hackers to access a lot of Dropbox resources based on the LinkedIn hack. And so if you're using your password and email on some site that has less security, maybe you're using it on some local forum that doesn't really have enterprise security, then they get hacked. Someone could use that password on your bank account. Another issue with PINs and passwords is that computers are very, very good at guessing them. They can go through thousands of combinations a second. Now, a lot of servers do put in things to try to slow down the guessing. That's why you'll see the I am not a robot proofs. Those aren't really designed to stop all illegitimate requests, but they do try to slow them down. And let's say your company or whoever tries to make you have a really long password. Now, the issue with that is it's annoying. It's annoying to try to type in something really long with symbols and characters that is hard to remember, so maybe you even write it down somewhere and that has security issues with that. Another issue with PINs and passwords is that there's no audit trail. You can't see where various devices were when they tried to access your account. And if you spot a problem, you can't lock out those devices without just changing your password, which again is really inconvenient. So a lot of companies and organizations have started doing is requiring what's called two-factor or multi-factor authentication. So instead of just a PIN or password, that's something you know, you also have something that you are. Maybe it's biometrics like a fingerprint or face scan, or it's something that you carry with you. Maybe it's your phone or it's a token device. If we think about it, most hacking attempts aren't coming from your neighbor. They're not coming from someone you share a house with. They're coming from someone probably across the world that doesn't have access to these physical things. So just having that physical requirement that you're carrying something will thwart almost all attempts at hacking your account. One of the most popular ways to do multi-factor authentication is for you to use an app on your phone. And that app will have an algorithm that will generate a code every 10, 15 seconds. And the server will have the exact same algorithm that will generate a similar code. And these codes are pretty much random, and so you don't know what the next code will be. And if your code matches their code, that means you probably have the same app or same device in your presence. A simpler way is to have the server send a code to you through a known channel. So they could send it to your phone via text message, or they could email it to you. Now the text message especially has issues because SIM jacking, where an attacker will call up your phone company and they'll use their charm and they'll be able to take over your phone number. Then when they do a password reset or whatever, the company sends a text message thinking it's to your phone because they're using your phone number, but it ends up going to the attacker's phone. So that definitely has an issue because it trusts that line of communication, which honestly shouldn't be trusted as much. The email, though, is a good technique. And let's get into that a little bit. So the standard way of using multi-factor authentication devices, where you both have the algorithm, maybe it's in your app or a physical device, that's good, but that means you always have to have that specific physical device with you. Maybe it's a keychain or something. And people largely keep their phones on them all the time, but let's expand the idea a little bit. What we want to do is we want to establish authentication through a known device. Now, if we think back to the bank analogy, let's say you have a company that does business at the bank, and you have a lot of people that want to be able to access that account. Now, what you can do, or what the bank can do, is say, hey, whenever you want to expand access to a new user, what you can do is have a known user come in and introduce them. And that's what banks do a lot of times. They have people that already have access to the account. They'll come in and they'll sign the signature card, and then the new person comes in and signs the signature card with them. And then the bank is like, okay, now this new person has access to the bank account. And that's a really good way to do it. So what you do is you say, hey, I want to access this account. And then the server says, all right, sounds good. Let's see, let's ask someone we already know. And it's like, oh, you're logged in on your phone, you're logged in on your computer. Who should I ask to see if you can access this account? And so you can select which one. And that's really what people mean when they say a passwordless authentication regime. You no longer have to memorize a password. All you do is say, hey, ask my phone if we want to expand access to this new device. So the server will reach out to the phone and say, hey, you'll get a notification. You'll say, yep. And that, in my mind, is really the future of authentication. People talk about it as a passwordless authentication scheme where you never have to memorize a password. The password isn't even useful anymore. All you do is say, hey, I want to log in to this account. And then the authenticator pops up with a notification that says, do you want to expand access to this? And you say yes. And additionally, sometimes it will display a code, and then you have to put in the code when you authenticate it, just to make sure someone doesn't get lucky or they don't catch you unawares and they submit the request the same time that you're submitting a request and you end up authenticating the wrong person.